All right, so we're going to start The Whipping Boy. The author is Sid Leishman, I think that's how you say that. There's no synopsis on this one, but it's about a prince and his whipping boy. Back in the day, way back in the day.
Yeah, you told us this, he got whipped for the prince.
Yeah, when the prince, or if someone of royalty, like a prince, did something wrong, and they would whip him or punish him, there would be a whipping boy to take the punishment for him, so the prince wouldn't actually get hurt. That's kind of what this story is about. Okay, chapter 1. Chapter 1 is called In Which We Observe a Hair-Raising Event. The young prince was known here and there, and just about everywhere else, as Prince Brat. Not even black cats would cross his path. One night, the king was holding a grand feast. Sneaking around behind the lords and the ladies, Prince Brat tied their powdered wigs to the backs of their oak chairs. Then he hid behind a footman to wait. When the guests stood up to toast the king, their wigs came flying off. The lords clasped their bare heads as if they'd been scalped, and the ladies shrieked. Prince Brat, he was never called that to his face, of course, tried to keep from laughing. He clapped both hands over his mouth, but out it ripped, a cackle of ha-has and hee-hees. The king spied him, and he looked mad enough to spit ink. He gave a furious shout. Fetch the whipping boy! Prince Brat knew that he had nothing to fear. He had never been spanked in his life. He was a prince, and it was forbidden to spank, thrash, cuff, smack, or whip a prince. A common boy was kept in the castle to be punished in his place. Fetch the whipping boy! The king's command traveled like an echo from guard to guard up the stone stairway to a small chamber in the drafty north tower. An orphan boy named Jemmy, the son of a rat catcher, roused from his sleep. He had been dreaming happily of his ragged but carefree life before he'd been plucked from the streets and sewers of the city to serve as royal whipping boy. A guard shook him fully awake. On your feet, my boy! Jemmy's eyes blazed up. Ain't I already been whipped twice today? What's the prince done now? Let's not keep the great folks waiting, lad. In the main hall, the king said, 20 whacks! Defiantly biting back every yelp and cry, the whipping boy received the 20 whacks. Then the king turned to the prince, and let that be a lesson to you. Yes, Papa. The prince lowered his head so as to appear humbled and contrite, but all the while he was feeling a growing exasperation with his whipping boy. In the tower chamber, the prince fixed him with a scowl. You're the worst whipping boy I ever had. How come you never bawl? I don't know, said Jemmy with a shrug. A whipping boy is supposed to yowl like a stuck pig. We dress you up fancy and feed you royal, don't we? It's no fun if you don't cry. Jemmy shrugged again. He was determined never to spring a tear for the prince to gloat over. Yelp and bellow next time, you hear? Or I'll tell Papa to give you back your rags and kick you back into the streets. Jemmy's spirits soared. Much obliged, your royal awfulness, he thought. I'll take my rags, and I'll be gone in the half blink of an eye. All right, chapter 2 is called Wherein the Prince Cannot Write His Name. Jemmy could count on a thrashing first thing in the morning. Sure and certain, he thought, as he pulled on his fine velvet breeches and silk stockings. The prince wouldn't know his lessons. The royal tutor was quick as a fly swatter with his willow, and Jemmy would be back in rags. Take a last look at me, Pa. Rest your bones, he muttered to himself. Did you ever think I'd be holed up in the king's own castle and all rigged up in duds would shame a peacock? Reckon I'd fetch a pair of sharp-toothed ferrets and go to rat-catching. Same as you, Pa. The tutor, Master Peckwit, was a round-faced man with fat cheeks. He pointed his whip at the prince. You fiddle-faddled scholar, he bellowed. One day you'll be king, and you still don't know the alphabet from pig tracks. The prince snapped his fingers. I can always get someone to read for me. You can't so much as write your name. Pish posh, I can always get someone to write my name for me. The tutor's cheeks, swelling with anger, almost unhorsed the small spectacles saddling his nose. It would be easier to educate a boiled cabbage. Prepare to be punished, your lordship. 10 whacks at least, said the prince, and good and hard if you please. Jemmy, who was obliged to be close at hand for the daily lessons, reckoned that freedom was now close at hand. The prince threw him a smirking glance as Master Peckwit raised the whip and beat the whipping boy like a carpet. Jemmy didn't bawl, he didn't yelp or bellow. 10 whacks, and not a sound escaped his lips. You contrary rascal, the prince exploded. I'm on to you, Jemmy from the streets. It's pure spite that you won't cry. Think you can cross me and get away with it? Ha! Never and no how. God, thought Jemmy. He's going back on his word. And don't try to run away. I'll have you tracked down till your tongue hangs out like a red flag. And so it went for more than a year. The prince learned nothing. The whipping boy learned to read, write, and do sums. All right, chapter 3. These chapters are pretty short. They're only like a couple pages, some of them. So we're going to read chapter 3. Chapter 3 is called The Runaways. On a night when the moon gazed down like an evil eye, the young prince appeared in Jemmy's chamber. Boy, tumble out of bed. I need a manservant. Jemmy saw that the prince was wearing a black cloak and carrying a wicker basket the size of a sea chest. What you up to now? Walking in your royal sleep, are you? I'm running away. The whipping boy sat bolt upright. Hardly a day passed that he didn't make one plan or another to run off. But a prince? What a horrible new mischief was this. You can't hop off like you was common folks. What's biting you? Said the prince. I'm bored. With dumping bullfrogs in the moat so no one got a wink of sleep? Boring. And didn't you laugh fit to kill when the knights slipped off their horses and clattered to the ground? You hog-greased the saddles. The prince folded his arms. Boring. And don't you get me thrashed so that this hide of mine feels like the devil run me over with spikes on his shoes? Let's be off. Why me, Jemmy thought. Can't you find a friend to run off with? But no, not you, Prince Brat. You've got no friends. That's why me. Jemmy pointed out to the window. It's night out, he protested. The best time, replied the prince. But ain't you afraid of the dark? Everyone knows that. You won't even sleep without a lit candle. Lies. Anyway, the moon's up, good and bright. Come on. Jemmy stared at him with dreadful astonishment. The king'll have a gory-eyed fit. Positively. He'll hunt us down. You'll get off light as a feather, but I'll be lucky if they don't whip me to the bone. More likely, I'll be hung from the gallows, scragged for sure. Your lookout, said the prince with a dry grin. Carry the basket, Jemmy from the streets, and follow me. All right, that's the end of chapter 3. We're going to stop there, okay?